Hey, everybody, it's Allison Gill. Welcome to The Breakdown, and thanks to Midas Touch for hosting this show. Let me tell you a tale of two whistleblowers. Back in 2019, a Trump lawyer named Eisenberg overclassified a politically embarrassing document, stashed it in a code word classified system so that no one could see it because it was politically embarrassing. Embarrassing enough that if that document got out, it could take down Donald Trump's presidency. But a brave CIA analyst knew about that document, filed a report under the whistleblower protection laws in August of 2019. The Inspector General at the time, Michael Atkinson, deemed it an urgent and credible matter. But Trump's Director of National Intelligence, Trump's DNI, Joseph McGuire, delayed the transmission of that report to Congress for 3 whole weeks, almost a month, citing executive privilege concerns. Now, that document they tried to hide was the transcript of Trump's call with Volodymyr Zelensky. Its transmission to Congress led to Trump's first impeachment. Now, let's fast forward to Trump's second term in office. 4 days after his inauguration, Trump fired pretty much all of the inspectors general, all but 2, right? And a few months later, in May, a whistleblower from the intelligence community filed a report with the Intelligence Community Inspector General, the ICIG. Now, the interim ICIG deemed the matter urgent, but couldn't determine the credibility. But then DNI Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, obstructed transmitting this report and the underlying classified document the report is based on to Congress, not for 3 weeks, but for 8 months. And we only learned about the existence of this whistleblower report last week, 1 day after the Wall Street Journal reported on it. And joining me to discuss the matter is the lawyer who represented both of these whistleblowers and is currently representing this one. Please welcome Andrew Bakaj from Whistleblower Aid. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you? Pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, too. I'm very excited to talk to you today. I have so many questions. First of all, did I get anything incorrect in the opening screed I just went through?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up very well.
Great. Thank you. There's more questions, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Because according to a letter you wrote to the Inspector General named Christopher Fox, this whistleblower retained you in November of last year. That's about 6 months
after. A little bit
after.
earlier than that, but around that time period, yeah.
Around that time period. But this would be 5 or 6 months after they filed their initial report. What caused them to reach out to Whistleblower Aid, and how did that introduction happen?
So without getting into too many specifics about my communications with my client, basically the fact that this disclosure wasn't being transmitted to Congress, and the fact that my client, after requesting to be able to go to Congress back in July of last year, the fact that there wasn't any movement on that, looked to find an attorney who knows how to handle these matters. And naturally, it just made sense that they would reach out to me. And so my first interface was to try and, introduce myself back to the IG's office. I do work with that office and other IG's offices, on a number of matters, quite often. It's what I do. And try and get this moving. I mean, it's as simple as that. The goal is very simple, and that is, let's follow the law. Let's get the client the ability to go to Congress, and let's make sure that the disclosure gets there and to the right people.
Yeah, agreed. Now, the first Zelensky whistleblower we learned later was a CIA whistleblower. And it's important for people to understand the structure of the Inspector General over the intelligence community. It's the Inspector General for the whole intelligence community. The individual alphabet agencies do not have their own inspectors. Oh, they do?
They do,
okay.
Yeah. I actually used to work for CIA IG. But right. I guess the one thing is that because if you're a member of the intelligence community, you have in that case, the ability to go to the ICIG instead of your home agency. But, in this particular case, it also made a lot of sense that this person went to the ICIG because it pertained to ICIG activity. So, yes, you can go to your home IG, NSAIG, CIIG, and they're presidentially appointed, Senate confirmed, as is the Intelligence Community Inspector General.
And when you say it pertained to ICIG stuff, you're talking about the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard,
yes,
right?
DNI, correct. It pertained to DNI activities in this particular case.
Okay, I think what I had was confusing in my mind is that there's only one place to go to FOIA all of the intelligence agencies.
Yeah, no, it gets, well, and the thing is, this is actually confusing for a lot of people, even those who are within the intelligence community, because, if you're working for a non-national security related agency, or the intelligence community agency, you have a lot more flexibility to go to Congress, for example. The reason why intelligence officers and contractors have to go through this particular process to try and get to Congress is because, and it makes sense, by the way, this makes logical sense. The information that they have, even though somebody on Capitol Hill, a member of the staff of the House or Senate Intelligence Committees, has a security clearance, obviously, they may not have the proper clearance to get that information. So this process is in part designed to make sure that that information gets to the right people the right way. And in this particular case, it's particularly true. The information here, the underlying intelligence at issue, is so sensitive. Only the Gang of Eight can see it, which means that there are certain pieces of intelligence, or compartments, if you will, and there are about 7 or 8 of them. And if they fall in one of those categories, the only people who can hear it are the chair and ranking member of the intelligence committees. So you got 4 right there. The Speaker of the House, the ranking member, the Senate Majority Leader, Senate Minority Leader. Right? So you get, it's a limited number of people who can see it, which arguably makes this a little bit easier. You don't have to figure out. You know the 8 people who can see this.
Right. And because, when I was thinking, when the first reporting came out that it was too classified to send to Congress, my first thought was, what is too classified for the Gang of Eight? Why, is there anything? But now, does this whistleblower come from ODNI or a different agency within the intelligence community? Or can you tell us?
I won't say what agency they're with, but they're within the intelligence community.
Gotcha.
They're a member of the intelligence community.
Okay. Now, about the structure of this, am I right in that there's a report, like a complaint, and then an underlying highly classified document at the core of at least one of the counts in the complaint? Is that how this is structured?
Yeah. So basically, everybody's focused, as they should be right now, about Gabbard not providing my client the ability to go directly to Capitol Hill, to the right folks, and not timely sending over the underlying disclosure, which, by the way, we can get into in a little bit, is apparently heavily redacted for reasons that are not related to classified information. But what's the underlying disclosure about? I'm going to get into it a little bit. So in the spring of last year, there was intelligence that was gathered by an agency that captured activity that's being conducted by somebody close to the president, right, without getting into any more specifics. And that intelligence was, this particular agency gave Tulsi Gabbard a heads up, right? Not necessarily unusual. If it's something that the head of an agency should be aware of, that's fine, right? But what happened next is where the problem starts, at least for Gabbard, is that upon receiving a hard copy of that intelligence, of that information, she then went to the president's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and discussed it. We don't know what those conversations were. We don't know what happened there. But the following day, when she returned to the DNI's office, she directed that intelligence not be distributed any further within the intelligence community. So typically what would happen is that this intelligence, this communication that was collected, right, between somebody close to the president and other actors, would be distributed to the offices and analysts and individuals who have the need to know, who need to act on this intelligence. And she came back and said, no, don't distribute it any further. And more to the point, make me the only one on the distribution list. But because she went to the president's chief of staff, this particular agency also sent it to Susie Wiles formally, as I understand it. So, and then it did not get distributed within the intelligence community. So the heart of this has never been really addressed. And I'm not confident that members of the Senate or the House, the Gang of Eight, who have a need to know, have seen this. And that's where the concern is. The complaint is about the blocking of the distribution of the intelligence, but the intelligence is really important to be viewed by those who have a need to know.
Understood. That sounds awfully familiar to me. That sounds a lot like what happened with the Zelensky call transcript, that they refused to put Vindman's edits in, stashed it in something called an NICE system, tried to limit the eyes on it. Now, did she, and during that impeachment, there was a lot of discussion about over-classifying something that might be politically embarrassing to an administration. Is it against the law to over-classify something to prevent other people from seeing it? And did that happen here?
So the short answer to that is yes. I mean, the goal is to not over-classify any documents. Particularly, you can't hide behind classification because something's embarrassing. And the level of classification is dependent upon, how the intelligence is collected, what the intelligence has. It's, you always hear intelligence officers and former officers talking about sources and methods because you don't want to show the world who your source is. You can burn a source, somebody can die, or a method, whether it's technical or otherwise, that allows you to capture that information. So, and at the same time, you can have intelligence that is part of an operation and it's classified accordingly. In this case, though, this is where I want to kind of drill down to a finer point, which is the intelligence is not, in my understanding, overclassified, although it appears to have been the excuse provided for having difficulty to get it to Capitol Hill, to the Gang of Eight. But then all of a sudden, and I've only learned this very recently, is that there's an assertion of executive privilege. And as I understand it, whatever has been transmitted to Congress, and I don't know what has been transmitted to Congress, and by the way, I haven't even seen the underlying disclosure.
You have clearance to see it, yeah?
Well, I have a security clearance, but it doesn't mean that I have the ability to see something like that. Even when I was in the intelligence community, I was only read in onto certain programs as I needed to know, and then read out. Right. So, but here's the thing. They're not redacting for Congress because of the classification. Now they're redacting from Congress because they're asserting executive privilege. What I found really interesting was that on Tuesday, this week has been kind of blending together, by the way. I don't know if it's been for you. I don't even know.
Yes, this whole,
I'm in London
this
right
whole
now,
year so far, actually.
I'm in London right now, so it's been just a kind of a whirlwind for me. But but in the Wall Street Journal article that came out on Monday, I believe the ICIG put out a comment that, this pertains to executive privilege and that by its nature, asserts presidential communications or activity. So it's kind of funny that they also, the intelligence community has also helped obviously define the obvious in terms of why you would assert executive privilege. But that should be, as a former, investigator and whatnot, I would call that a clue. And something that, one should, perhaps dig a little deeper into. But you really nicely captured something, which is classified information is typically what folks are concerned is misused to hide embarrassing things, right? In this particular case, they couldn't do it because it could go to the Gang of Eight. So now it becomes executive privilege.
Yeah, and I seem to remember Joseph McGuire, the DNI in the first Trump administration, refusing to answer congressional questions about his discussions with the president pursuant to executive privilege when it came to that particular Zelensky document as well.
Right.
Yeah,
but the underlying intelligence, I wouldn't know if there will be an executive privilege issue to that. So, that is a fight for Congress. To go to battle with the executive branch. But my role here is to help my client have the ability to meet with those members.
Right, as they should. And you sent a letter, I believe, to the ODNI saying, if we don't hear back from you on how to address Congress or guidance on how to address Congress by Friday, this past Friday. Then on Monday, we're going to go. And I wanted to ask you, when you are asking for guidance from Tulsi Gabbard's office on how to present this, is this sort of like a SEPA situation where they have classified information in court and they want to learn how, figure out how to and litigate how to use it in court by using substitutions or summaries? Is that kind of the guidance that you're looking for from Gabbard?
That's a good analogy. It's actually a little bit different. It is that, the staff members on the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, they have security clearances. But it doesn't mean that they're read in onto a specific program or operation that has to get into to the Hill. And in this particular case, because it's only restricted to the Gang of Eight, that then means that even the members of the staff can't see the underlying intelligence at issue. So the reason why I go to the IC and you're asking for guidance, you're not asking for permission. What you're asking for is, let's coordinate, help facilitate between the DNI and the ICIG and Congress who the points of contact need to be. And like I mentioned before, the irony behind it being limited to the Gang of Eight is actually, by definition, you already identify the very 8 people you got to go to. So it actually should be easier in some respects. Doesn't mean it's not highly sensitive. Obviously it is. But the process has, I think, been weaponized, unfortunately, in favor of hiding what happened.
It sounds like it, and it's not like they have a pattern doing that in the past, So it's I think something that needs to be investigated, as you've said multiple times. Now, the second part of this complaint is that an intelligence agency failed to refer a potential criminal matter, to the Department of Justice. Can you tell us which agency failed to refer that criminal matter, or what the criminal matter is? I think that's the one that the initial ICIG, interim or acting ICIG Tamara Johnson said she was not able to determine credibility. And she said I think I read that it was because she was obstructed. Somebody wouldn't answer her questions or something like that. So it sort of remained unable to determine its credibility. But can you tell us a little bit about that count?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar as much with that particular allegation. Obviously there are a lot of processes in place to make sure that intelligence is properly handled, that people, particularly who are American citizens, aren't being targeted as part of an intelligence operation. In this particular case, they were not. Everything was done lawfully, and somebody just seemed to have popped up on, this communication, this transmission. And so that's one thing. I do want to get to this credibility issue, and it's been kind of
because that doesn't stop you having to transmit the report to Congress.
So it's interesting. So first of all, absolutely correct. So that is not an issue. So the way this process works is that if the complaint or the disclosure is deemed to be urgent and credible by the ICIG, they can immediately go to the Hill. If they cannot make or do not make the determination that it's not urgent and or credible, then they go back to the whistleblower and say, this is our finding. And if you want to go to the Hill, tell us, and we'll facilitate that with the processes, et cetera, right? But what this case is interesting, because I'm going to go into what I didn't know when I learned it as counsel. Same thing for my client. So on June 6th, and on whistleblower.org, for those of your followers and those who are watching and listening, want to see the documents, if you go to whistleblower.org, you'll see a letter that I sent to the Hill to Tulsi Gabbard earlier this week that you referenced about me. If we don't get guidance by Friday, that I will be going on Monday and beginning the process of doing outreach to members of Congress. Then in that letter, you'll see exhibits. One of the exhibits is correspondence that my client received from the intelligence community, IG. And this was on June 6th, I believe. And that's where my client was notified that the acting IG at the time, Tamara Johnson, made that, if to be true, this would be an urgent concern. But she was unable to make a credibility determination. I understood that from my contacts that somebody was unable to or unwilling to. I don't want to go into the intent there. Maybe somebody was traveling to participate in the underlying fact finding. I have reason to believe that would be Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, fair enough.
I have reason to believe she wasn't traveling, but that's just my personal opinion.
Be that as it may, okay,
right.
So you
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, and the client still requested, the whistleblower still requested to go to the Hill and have this information transmitted back in June. I did not know until this week that 2 days later, the acting IG received a new information, presumably by Tulsi Gabbard. I'm making an assumption there. And reversed her or corrected her decision in an amended memorandum, saying that she found that the disclosure was not credible. What I find to be concerning is the timing of that, because one, for your listeners, if you were to go to a Washington Post article from June 6th or 7th, around that time frame, there were news reports that Tulsi Gabbard put in place somebody into the Intelligence Community IG's office by the name of Dennis Kirk. And the timelines suspiciously line up. Why is just for background, I know this is a great venue to do this because there's a lot of explaining and going to the background of how things are.
No, I was really curious about the all of a sudden not credible finding, and like who was it? Tamara Johnson. So tell us about Dennis Kirk.
Yeah, so first, as a just general overview, the inspectors general do internal investigations and oversight over the agencies within which they reside. They're part of the agency, but they're independent and neutral. So all presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed inspectors general report. Yes, they report to the president through the director or secretary of the agency, but they have a dual reporting requirement then to Congress. And they are an independent body. For example, their attorneys within the IG offices don't report to the attorneys at the agency or at the department, because how can you conduct oversight over an investigation, an audit, or an inspection of the very agency that you're a part of? So they're separate. They're intentionally separate, right? So going into the Kirk situation is that apparently Tulsi Gabbard had placed this person into the ICIG's office to monitor the activity within the IG's office. That destroys the independence and neutrality of the IG. And what I find
not that having her previous top aide Christopher Fox be the ICIG puts it in jeopardy enough. Not that that's not enough to put it in jeopardy and have a conflict of interest, but she's installed somebody in the ICIG office. Which again just kind of destroys the independence of that particular unit.
And also, this is before Fox came on board. I don't know Fox. I have no idea one way or another about him. But Tamara Johnson was a career federal civil servant, just like in any position in government. When the presidential appointment becomes vacant, somebody's got to be acting. The work of the organization has to continue. So she was appointed as acting. And while she's acting, you have this person in there monitoring what's going on behalf of the Director of National Intelligence, perhaps disclosures about her very conduct. And then, this is the interesting thing that has been, I think, that needs to kind of be understood, is that my client received that letter on June 6th, I believe, if I recall correctly. Right? And 2 days later, according to the ICIG's correspondence to Congress this week, this is when my client and I learned this, you're going to love it, the acting director of national intelligence changed her opinion in terms of the credibility of the underlying disclosure. I didn't know about this until Monday. My client didn't know about this until Monday. We found out this week. That's news to us.
That is extremely peculiar. And also, didn't Christopher Fox say in a letter to you that Tamara Johnson had administratively closed this matter in June of last year?
That was, I believe, in the letter that he sent to Congress. So I've not received any correspondence. He went over, yeah, that's the thing. There, if and the DNI posted on X, they went over the chronology of events for the decision making process, and it just there are things that the strangest thing for me is that there was no update to my client. And then when I came on board and was interacting with the office, which, from my experience has been, there are a lot of good folks who work there, that's not something that I was aware of. And that surprised me and that concerns me. Why is this secret change all of a sudden happening? Which, by the way, doesn't change the fact that he still can go to Congress.
Right. All that still exists.
All that still exists. So, and we're still waiting months later. The other thing that I want to get into is this notion of credibility. And how do you define credibility? And apparently in the case of the IG, in terms of what I've just seen this week presented by Fox to Congress, is that, if information is provided by a whistleblower that may be secondhand or that they've read, they cannot provide the document because it's so sensitive and classified, that when they speak to the alleged subject of the investigation, the wrongdoer, if you will, and they say, well, I didn't do it, that person's credibility, because they're talking about themselves firsthand, is higher than somebody saying that they heard this as part of a meeting or, whatever the case may be. And that shuts it down. That's a crazy way of determining credibility in my mind, my opinion. I don't think I know that no lawyer or investigator would conclude any activity with talking to only two parties. He said, she said, he said, he said, she said, whatever the case may be, and making conclusions strictly based on that. By the way, this 14-day urgent concern process is not sufficient time to conduct an investigation. It's merely an initial determination if it should go to Congress immediately. Right. That's right.
Kind of like a temporary restraining order. Like, we can't look at all the merits and everything right now, but for now, transmit it and, do an investigation on the full merits of the case.
Exactly. Because, things may be hitting the fan. You should be aware of this, Congress, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of this. But in the meantime, at least it's on your radar. That's kind of the whole point of this. And this never got on Congress's radar. And there has been, to my knowledge, no investigation of the underlying issues. So you have, and this is this is the reality of life. And I'm here to represent folks who are trying to get when you see something, you say something. When you see something wrong, you go to the IG or whatever the case may be. And members of Congress are, and it is the world that we live in, go into their own corners and they'll say, well, the IG said it's not credible, therefore this has no credibility. And that word hits because of what people hear when they say it's not credible, therefore it must be flawed and there's nothing there. That's not the case here. It's an initial determination to say, is there something that needs to be investigated? And the standards that are, I believe, my opinion, are being relied on in making a credibility determination are flawed. Again, a red herring, still should go to Congress. And why have we waited 8 months to get there? Which, by the way, Congress still does not have, the Gang of Eight doesn't have the underlying information because they're still withholding it, redacting it. And I have no idea if the underlying intelligence was ever transmitted to Congress.
Wow. So let's say you don't hear from Gabbard's office on guidance for going to give an unclassified briefing to Congress. And so let's say you go Monday because you haven't heard. What does that look like? I assume it's the Gang of Eight, even though you don't know the classification, what's the classified matter is. Would at that point your client just take it upon themselves to summarize what it is or substitute what it is or give hints to what what is an unclassified briefing given the highly classified nature of the underlying document look like when you don't get guidance from the DNI?
Right. So basically there's some additional information obviously that I know that is unclassified, but I hesitate to share it because I just want to be mindful of, the equities at play for everybody. Right. And so there are things that I can then elaborate upon for members of Congress and senators, by the way, who are beyond the Gang of Eight, but ideally, within the intelligence committees, to give them an understanding what this is about. And then, so that way the Gang of Eight knows what they're dealing with. This is serious, and that they need to push and assert their oversight role as the under Article 1 as Congress over the executive and try and at least get to the bottom of this and figure out what's going on. As far as a whistleblower going to Congress, that would certainly be a conversation that I would have to have, and my team at whistleblower.org would have to have with Congress, because we would want to make sure we would be able to get this person to the Hill in a safe and secure manner to protect their identity, safety, and all of that stuff. So then they can elaborate in an unclassified manner. And then, of course, when it's unclassified, it's going to be limited, but something's better than nothing, right? To go into, what the general, issues are. And then...
Right. Like if it were the Zelensky call, you would say, seems like he was going to withhold aid unless they opened an investigation, like a summary type of a situation.
Yeah. And I did that. Even in that case, I was able to say, this involves a phone call. This involves this, and this, this isn't, nonsense. In fact, when I was working on the Zelensky call, I went to the intelligence committees, so I tried to meet with them, met with one of them. And literally, as I was concluding my briefing, an email with a letter attached to it from the ICIG came over in 2019, and then one of the lawyers stood up. I went and looked at this document. He called over the other lawyers to take a look at this, and they all turned pale. Ugh. And then they looked at me and said, "We just received an email from the ICIG alerting us that they're being precluded from coming to Congress with an urgent concern." And the timeline, the chronology, everything matches up what you just came forward with.
Yeah,
literally as I'm there.
I was on stage with Renato Mariotti at a live show in Chicago when it came up on my phone that Adam Schiff has learned of a whistleblower report of immense proportions, and it all unfolded from there. Now, this may be unrelated, but we've oddly there's some new reporting from Reuters about Tulsi Gabbard that last spring she went down to Puerto Rico and seized voting machines as part of an investigation into Nicolas Maduro over false claims of foreign election interference. I know that you can't talk about what's in the... Is that related at all? Or
we just have... At all.
Not related at all.
Not related at all.
We can rule it out.
We can rule that out. I mean, the fact that there's all that stuff happening as well, it just compounds the problem. But yes, not related to that one.
God, okay, totally different awful thing happening.
Different problems.
Different problems. That's a very lawyerly way to put it. Now, you told Aaron Burnett that there needs to be an investigation into this. What does that look like? What kind of investigation? Like, given Democrats don't have a majority in the House like they did when the Zelensky whistleblower complaint came in, what sort of investigation can be undertaken here if you don't have subpoena power, and even if you did, you don't have a cooperative DNI or DOJ? So what does an investigation look like for this particular issue?
To your point, if we're talking about a congressional investigation at this juncture, it will require courage and people acting apolitically and in the interest of national security purely to try and find out what's right and what's wrong. National security, the things that are happening globally that affect every American citizen, that affect everybody in the world, should not have a left or right or posture on this. This should be apolitical. Let's make sure we're all safe. So it's going to take some courage on some folks' part. I would say there are a couple of investigations that can happen, depending on how you scope it, right? I mean, one, why was the underlying intelligence being withheld from disseminating it within the intelligence community for action, right? Why are they being blocked from the things that they need to do, that they need to know to do their jobs? That's kind of a big thing that's just hanging out there. You can, of course, conduct an investigation as to what Tulsi Gabbard did or didn't do with respect to trying to prevent that distribution of intelligence. You can look into what she has done or not done with respect to getting this urgent concern to Congress timely and providing my client timely guidance, which we were still yet waiting for, to go.
You could ask Tamara Johnson about that credibility determination and
Right.
Dennis Kirk, right?
You can find out what happened there. There's a lot of things. Again, it depends on what you want to scope. You can scope out. The thing about the investigative world, and that's a world that I've worked in for a number of years, is that it depends. What is the focus on, right? And it could be multiple different things. So because I'll tell you this, if you have one global investigation on all these things, they'll take years to complete. But you focus what the questions are. Focus one investigation on the intelligence, focus on the activity of Tulsi Gabbard, focus on, and it may be related, But yeah, those are the things that I would want to know. From my client standpoint, I want to know what the heck happened that delayed this.
Yeah.
Right?
8 months?
Yeah, why are we here?
And the excuses, executive privilege, government shutdown, staffing changes,
That's great, by the way. Again, deflection. The disclosure was filed. The initial contact to the IG's office happened in April. Okay. But the disclosure wasn't finalized until May. So just to let you know, when you make an initial phone call to the IG's office, that doesn't trigger the 14-day timeline. It starts when they've got everything from you, from the whistleblower, right? Because it wouldn't make any sense if you say, "Hey, my first phone call is I want to meet with you. Clock starts, but you're traveling for a week and you just lost 7 days." That doesn't make any sense. So the clock started in May, and in early June 6th, this determination was made. The time between June 6th and the government shutdown and the change in staff and the new IG didn't happen for months.
Yeah, I think Fox got there in October, I think, and
yeah, so
government shutdown right around then.
Yeah, so what happened between June and October?
Barbecue. There's stuff. There's just stuff. There's things. People are busy.
Having
Andrew.
fun. It's fine. You can have fun. We all should have fun. It's your life, right? But that's not going to slow down. Oh, by the way, and that's the other thing is, it doesn't slow down. It shouldn't take even 5 months to get it there. So
people freaked out that it took a month to get the Zelensky report to Congress.
So think about that. That was a disclosure about communication by the president with a foreign leader, and I had that. We filed the disclosure. It was actually my dad's birthday, August 12th of 2019. That's why I remember that date. And in just over a month, we got it to the Hill. This one's 8 months. And now we're asserting executive privilege to hide the classified information from the Gang of Eight. It's a shell game. It's really disturbing. And, here's process-wise. What's interesting is process is boring, but when things don't go the right way, they start, eliciting, clues, again, as we say in the investigative world. Tulsi Gabbard could have, first, her staff could have simply called the Hill and said, "Hey, we've got something that's coming your way that's really sensitive. We're trying to figure out how to get it to you, but we're giving you a heads up right now. Give us a week or two," whatever, right? That's an approach that, as I understand it from former senior officials in that world, has been done. And when Gabbard would have transmitted that to Congress, she's actually allowed by statute to provide comment. So if she wanted to say that, that the disclosure is erroneous or whatever the case may be, she could have drafted a cover memo. And
right. Like, we think this is stupid, but here it is by law. We have to give it to you.
Yeah. So instead she's hiding it. Instead she's hiding it. So again, the process failure raises a lot of questions because now we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's not like I said, this administration has a history of hiding things that are politically embarrassing for them.
Totally transparent.
Most transparent in history. I'm the most transparent ever. Yeah. Okay.
Stream of consciousness is not transparency. Just putting it out there.
Oh, yeah, very, very well. So a lot of people tend to ask, especially folks who are super engaged, really politically aware folks who watch The Breakdown, watch Midas Touch, watch my shows.
Yeah.
Always are like, what can I do? What can I do? The first thing I want to tell people is that you can support Whistleblower Aid. It's a nonprofit. You can make a tax-deductible donation. We'll put the link here up on the screen. It's whistleblower.aid.org/beans. You can donate to help these amazing lawyers protect these incredibly brave whistleblowers. It's a lot of process. There's a lot you have to go through for the legal process to. It's a lot to navigate. It takes really, really brilliant lawyers. So you can help there. And then obviously, I'm going to tell you, flip Congress so that if the Republicans don't want to investigate this particular issue and others, we will have a little more power and control the committees to be able to continue investigations. Is there anything else you can think of, Andrew, or any other information about this? Again, I know you can't give us any indication about what's in this. We know what it's not. It's not the Maduro, right. Puerto Rico voting machines thing.
That. Not that.
Anything else you want to say about what people, regular folks like us, can do, or anything else you want to add about what you know about this complaint?
I can't add anything else about the complaint, but and thank you for mentioning what whistleblower.org, what we do. It's not, so what we do is just to kind of give everybody an understanding. We provide free legal services to federal employees. That they would not necessarily be able to afford otherwise, to make sure that they are able to lawfully disclose things that they see that are wrong, that violations of law, rule, or regulation. And particularly for members of the intelligence community, if they mishandle that, if they mishandle classified information, they can be charged under the Espionage Act. So doing this right matters. And then the other thing that we do that's really different from some other organizations is that we provide wraparound 360 services. So, we've actually had in the past where we've had to ensure that individuals are protected physically for fear of retaliation, not through like adverse actions like being fired, but, being doxxed is a real thing. And so we go to great lengths to make sure that we have thought through the processes to make sure that our clients are safe, comfortable, and well taken care of. It's a lot. This is to become a whistleblower at any time, even when things are, in the normal world, is a heavy lift. Now more so than ever. And the folks who are coming forward, because government, so many people have been removed, they're senior officials. There's a lot to lose. It's challenging, but we're here to help.
Yeah, and I have to say, even though Trump came in, fired all the inspectors general, tried to get rid of any kind of oversight apparatus that he possibly could, by gutting the public corruption unit at the DOJ, just all of this stuff to getting rid of all the oversight, getting rid of FOIA, gutting FOIA offices. Despite all that, there are still career professionals in these agencies that want to and need to blow the whistle, that have the kind of services that Whistleblower Aid provides. And so we should be encouraging folks. When I worked for government for 12 years, it was encouraged to blow the whistle. You weren't you didn't get in trouble if you pointed out some fraud waste. It was a thank you for pointing that out. Or if you did something wrong, you just said, I made this mistake, let's fix it immediately. And everybody was happy and wonderful and great. So to have these brave individuals, especially now in this environment, they need to have that protection, and I'm glad that you give them that.
What's interesting? There's one other thing that I will add is that because, for example, you mentioned the Department of Justice, there are a lot more attorneys coming forward, and that actually is really challenging because of the attorney-client privilege and all of the rules that are unique to counsel. So we're working through a lot of issues to make sure that the folks who want to come forward are doing so in a way that protects them. That's why we're here to help.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you taking the time. I know it was a lot of questions today. I appreciate you taking the time to explain everything in this granular detail. I think it means a lot to the folks watching.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure, seriously. And I hope, I look forward to maybe speaking with you again after Monday to see what goes down in Congress. So everyone here on Midas, thank you. Thank you for watching The Breakdown. You can follow me at MullerSheWrote.com. And we will see you next week on The Breakdown.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.